Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Commio's Telecom Wiseguys webinar. My name is Tim McLain. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Commio. Really excited to be with you today. In preparing the slate of topics that we present as part of our Wiseguys series, the same three-letter acronym started popping up over the last few months, and that's RCS. So I'm excited to present to you guys sort of the state of the state when it comes to messaging, whether we're talking about SMS, MMS, or this newfangled three-letter acronym, which we love to make up in telecom, three-letter acronyms, RCS. So before we dive in, just a quick reminder, obviously use the chat and or the Q&A buttons if you have anything you'd like to ask during the presentation. Of course, we are recording this. We will send around the video probably either later today or early tomorrow. And that email always comes from me. So if you ever have any questions, comments, thoughts, feel free to reply to that email. I will get those and either get you your answer or reply to you. So with that, grab a drink, sit back, relax. We've got a good 15, 20 minutes here of time together. I appreciate you taking out time of your day. And let's dive right in. So, today it's important to understand that not all messaging is SMS. I think we all use SMS as the sort of the short way of saying text messaging. And the reason for that is we know all of us in the industry that there are a couple flavors of messaging out there, and they're limited by certain things. So the first thing is, we may all remember when texting first came on the scene well over a decade ago that it's limited to 160 characters. Um, that's that's a big deal. It also cannot send images, another huge deal. So it's the type of files that they allow, as well as the size of the messages. And also, here's an interesting one to think about, is the type of connectivity that they require. So back in the day, could we call pagers early form of text messaging? Maybe. But you had to have a very specific device and a very specific plan with a provider to be able to get, a dot matrix set of letters onto a little pager on your belt. The same thing was true for early SMS. Um, you had to have a carrier plan, and now, of course, with MMS, you need a smartphone so that you can display an image. So all those require a different level of connectivity, a different connection, a different type of plan to allow you to send and receive those messages. And also, every type of messaging is different. It's who are you reaching with an individual type of message? Um, who are they? Where are they located? We have to buy a special plan in some cases if we're going outside of our country that we live in. And also, how many people can we reach, right? So things to keep in mind. And lastly, this is an important one, is not every type of messaging can handle business messaging. So when we say business messaging, we don't mean P2P or handset to handset, person to person. We mean application to person. So for an A to P campaign from a business, it all depends on what type of business you are. What are you trying to accomplish with your messaging? Is it a simple two-factor authentication? Is it a notice about a product or service that somebody bought? Is it a political message? Sorry, my phone is blowing up with those as we speak. I'll guarantee you there'll be five more by the time we're done today. But each type of messaging requires a different, not only, connectivity, not only a format, but also each different type can only handle certain types of business or political or whatever messaging. So messaging sounds complicated because it is, and there's easy ways to step through and figure out which one is right for you. And by the way, which ones are coming that are going to make this whole landscape different, and I would argue better. So something else to keep in mind when we're talking about messaging or communications in general in 2024 and soon to be 2025 is this whole notion of KYC. There you go again. Another three-letter acronym you can put on your belt. But KYC stands for Know Your Customer. So this started, sort of in the lawyer space, in, big Fortune 500, financial type companies, where they had to be very careful about recording the customer information of the people that they were working with in that financial, industry because, obviously there's enforcement mechanisms involved. If somebody's doing something potentially illegal or untoward, you need to establish chain of custody for the money. The same thing is true now in telecommunications. So somebody like Commio, or let's say, Twilio, SignalWire, it doesn't really matter who your provider is, has to be able to provide know your customer information for the folks that we allow to come onto our networks and send not only text messages, but also voice calls. So if you're a provider, if you're a reseller in any way, you have to, in 2024 and soon to be 2025, be able to ask and answer questions about the folks that are using your pipes to send communications. So, and here's just a few of the things, and this is not exhaustive because when we audited our KYC, there's up to, I think, 95 different types of information that we potentially should be or could be asking for. Not all of it applies to every type of customer for sure, but it's everything from what's the name of the business, where is it located, what's the tax ID, who's the CEO, who's the exec suite, and can we prove all of that? Can we use public records or databases to verify it's this company in this location with this tax ID, with this CEO or this exec team? That's a great start. You'd be surprised how often that information does not line up and would disqualify you from being able to communicate. You also have to be able to establish a history. So ideally, if you've worked with multiple vendors in the past, you need to be able to, tell your current provider about those folks so that they can use that information to verify the quality of your traffic, the type of traffic, verifying your basic information so that you can be deemed trustworthy for communicating across somebody's network. Lastly, are you using any lists? Ideally not, because everything needs to be 100% opt-in this time around. No, you can't buy a list and blast text messages or phone calls to it. You have to have what's known as first party opt-in. So that's why a lot of folks that used to buy lists that, the list owners would say, oh, we have our own opt-in information. That's no longer good enough. You have to be operating your own properties, your own website, your own web forms, and each of the campaigns ideally have to have their own opt-in. And you have to be able to prove that. And by the way, we have all this information in a number of ebooks, which we will provide links to go along with the information from this webinar for how to make sure that when you're gathering people's permission, opt-in, on your site, on your web forms, what are your options and what you should be collecting. And by the way, what you have to be saying. And I will say this unapologetically, the biggest carrier with the most rules, with the largest potential penalties that everybody's paying attention to right now is T-Mobile. So if you can get a campaign approved by T-Mobile, make sure all your ducks in a row for T-Mobile and get traffic to T-Mobile, you're going to be just fine for every other large carrier, in the world when it comes to, well, I should say, well, at least in America, that's my domain of knowledge. But T-Mobile has the strictest rules. In fact, they just revised them last week. There's new wording. Sherry, I see you on the call, our content person. Thank you for keeping our documents up to date. It is an almost daily need here at Commio to keep our customers in the know about that stuff. So again, we'll be sending links to those along the way. And lastly, is this thing another? See, Cherry, thank you for all these three-letter acronyms. DNC scrubbing. What does that mean? Do not call list. So the carriers rely on people like Commio, like every other communication provider, voice and text messaging, to be getting their own copy of the do not call data and scrubbing it internally in their system so that even if our customers come through and try to send a text or a call to somebody who's on the do not call list, it's now our job to make sure that that traffic cannot be sent across our network. So that's also a relatively new requirement. So it's interesting. You came here thinking you were going to learn about RCS. Well, guess what? This is something else you really need to know about too to stay out of trouble. So, and again, you see here, FCC, Twilio, Google Verify require these details. Customers really appreciate it. I had a good friend of mine, Alan Quayle, who some of you may be friends of on LinkedIn, and he said, hey, all of a sudden, T-Mobile, I stopped getting spam texts and spam calls almost entirely from T-Mobile about 2 weeks ago. Well, guess what? That was when their new rules came out. So again, um, customers appreciate it when they're not getting spam calls and messages, and all the providers now require it. So again, I would say this: if we could summarize know your customer, it's the goal is all of us in this ecosphere want to be sending clean traffic that's traceable, that has chain of custody, that there's know your customer at every link in the chain. So we start with the business to somebody like, say, Commio, who's actually enabling the communication channels. And when those communications are sent, voice or messaging, through to AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, that if they see something that they think is wrong, incorrect, potentially spam, they're going to contact us, and we're going to have to be able to show chain of custody down to our customers, and we're going to use that know your customer KYC information to do that. And again, the example here is no spam. And by the way, if you want to see a great example, this is one of the big ones in the industry. Go over to Twilio. Just Google Twilio Trust Hub, and you'll get an idea of somebody who's leading the pack on this. Cameo, we have our own mechanisms for gathering, verifying, and posting this information internally to adhere to the rules. But Twilio does a fantastic job literally on their platform to say, go ahead and build something on Twilio, voice or a messaging application. But before you can unlock stir shaken to, for calls, before you can do an A2P messaging campaign, you need to go through our Trust Hub and give us the information that's legally required before we can even unlock those products to send messages. And that is the new paradigm that I think most providers will be moving to, if not in the next few months, then certainly in the next year, to make sure that we're not running afoul of the FCC um, and the carriers, because we just want to be able to send traffic and stay out of trouble. So I love this chart. This really sort of shows you what each of the different flavors of messaging out there are capable of. And again, I started off talking about SMS, 160 characters. Um, you don't need an internet connection to do that. As long as you're connected to a carrier through your phone, you can send and receive a text message. Um, Again, cross-platform, global availability, and yes, it does support campaigns. So through the campaign registry, you can register a campaign and leverage SMS. MMS takes it to the next level with limited media support. And what do we mean by limited is primarily people use that to send an image. So a lot of our folks, customers, send, especially political campaigns. I'm sure you have them on your phone right now. An image pops up, and then there's a block of text underneath that usually has a link inside of it, along with the basic information of how to stop the communication if you need to by typing stop in some other language. Um, you don't need an internet connection, but you do need data to be able to receive those images. Again, makes perfect sense. And again, just like SMS, cross-platform, global availability, supports campaigns. And we're going to talk a little bit through the rest of this short webinar about OTT apps, three-letter acronyms, over-the-top applications, Apple's iMessage, and then we're going to end, of course, and really talk more about RCS. And the great news is that I got up this morning. Here's my iPhone 15. I installed iOS 18. Guess what was in it? RCS. So limited support. It's not encrypted end to end. RCS can be encrypted end to end. It's not currently on Apple, but the basic implementation of RCS is now live. So as of today, we can say that Android and the iPhone support RCS. And I think we're literally on day one of the new paradigm of messaging going forward. Let's see. We did have a chat message. Um, great question, Scott. Uh, yeah, that's a great question. So this whole notion of DNC scrubbing is an open question. So there's a lot of different reasons for people being on the DNC list for specific types of communications, but they may have enabled others. So that's really why you can't just blanket block all people who are on the do not call list, because if you have a prior business relationship and if you've given prior approval to your number to receive certain types of voice and text messages, those will still get through. So I may have misspoke too much about that. The idea is that um, you have to be able to have the lists available inside of your system. And especially if a customer comes back to us, for instance, a Commio, and by the way, I'm the one who created the system for harvesting these requests. If you go to our help site, our Zendesk site, or you go to our website, there is a form called Report a Number. And that's where we basically can go back to our customers and see, hey, you have Commio phone numbers. This person at this number has said that they're receiving a call or a text that they don't want. Then we can trace it back to the customer with our internal tools and see whether they may be on the do not call list, but they may have enabled that communication or that text message campaign from a certain customer or customer's customer. And then we work with our customers. Sorry, I've said customers a lot there, and make sure that the communication is either legit or not. And the great news is that when people send that in, we can actually communicate with the end user and say, all right, you told us this. Our network operation team reached out to this company that you reported. By the way, you gave them permission, and here's the information that they provided when you gave them that information. So there's some back and forth, but very good question. Um, So again, SMS and MMS, they're the granddaddies. They were the basic beginners of the messaging campaigns, or should I say, of all messaging. I've been in the industry now long enough to remember when the campaign registry didn't exist, when it was the Wild West. You could literally send any message you wanted to pretty much anybody you wanted, repercussion free. This would have been 6 years ago. And now that world no longer exists. These are still ubiquitous. Everybody's devices can still handle them, but the rules have completely changed. So, back in the day, it was 160 characters, no media. You guys may remember that Twitter actually popped up not long after SMS was released. And guess what? There's a reason why Twitter's initial messages were only 160 characters because they were using SMS as part of their platform. But again, it's 160 characters, no media. With MMS, you can have ostensibly unlimited characters, but then it's going to be broken up into multiple messages. You don't want to send somebody a book through an MMS, but technically it's unlimited. You can have images and you can also have audio and short videos. And again, you're only limited by the file size. Every carrier is different. You got to look those rules up. And again, for most messages that we get all day, I don't know about you, I primarily get SMS messages, not a lot of MMS, unless it's a political message. Remember, you know how it is. But it's adequate for most types of messages, especially two-factor authentication, appointment reminders, those kinds of things. My son, who's in his early 20s, he would qualify. I don't think he's ever sent a message longer than 15 characters. You know how it is, in each one in its own row. That's how it goes. And again, virtually all campaigns are SMS, MMS. Approvals are complicated and expensive, and that's true. Today, you really have to keep up on the rules. You need to make sure that you're registering the right type of campaign. You're going to pay a little fee for that initial vetting, or potentially a small additional fee for extra vetting, with which a lot of folks like T-Mobile are now requiring more and more. You need to make sure that the messages that you're providing as part of those registrations are exactly or very, very close to what you're actually sending. You have to beware message drift. If you get approval to send one type of campaign, a one type of message with these 2 or 3 example messages, maybe 4, if you start to drift, you may be questioned about that. So, I liken it a lot to, I started my career as a journalist. I worked with, newspaper editors, and I could sit in the back and write whatever story I wanted. But as soon as that story was given to an editor, it was invariably, no matter how good I thought it was going to get torn apart. And I feel like you guys need to have that same energy going into your campaign approvals. You're basically handing all the information about your communications to somebody who knows the rules, regulations, what's allowed, what's not allowed, and make sure that your I's are dotted, your T's are crossed, that you've used that inverted pyramid, just kidding, as part of your story, that you've got all the right things in all the right places because, one I that's not dotted, one T that's not crossed. If you forget to say that you're not going to sell your opt-in lists, your opt-in data in your privacy policy. There's so many of these little things that will trip you up and will prevent you from being approved quickly. You just got to work with somebody like Commio who knows all the rules and can help you through these processes. But again, SMS, MMS today is still the granddaddy, is still by far the most used in America. Now, in other countries, that's not necessarily the case anymore. These over-the-top apps have really taken over, and we look a little bit like a dinosaur, believe it or not, in America, but this is where we are. But let's talk about those over-the-top apps. So when we say over-the-top, by the way, my mind always goes to a cable box on top of a TV. That's what we used to call OTT in the digital advertising space to get an ad on a set-top box on a TV. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about sort of over the top. This is an application that's running on a phone, right? So we're talking about WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger are the two most popular over the top apps. And in WhatsApp and Instagram, right? So these are not using the carriers in any way. These are individual apps that people have to install on a phone, and they use Wi-Fi or cellular data and the internet, and they're not interoperable, right? So these are message streams that happen on WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook Messenger directly, and you must basically have the app and you friend each other, right? So this limits campaigns. So you're not going to be able to use an OTT app to blast out a campaign unless you're buying an ad, in which case that's not really over the top messaging. That's an ad buy. Um, but really, again, today we see most businesses, if they're doing anything with OTT messaging, they're using WhatsApp and Messenger directly. Um, yeah, and in fact, I just sold my my automobile using Facebook Marketplace, and all the communication happened with I think 9 prospective buyers over Facebook Messenger. Didn't use text messaging even once. It was all over Messenger. And the great thing, guys, is when I sold the car the other day, I could just hit, okay, I sold it, and oh yeah, this guy was great. And oh, by the way, remove all of the Messenger chats about the car from my OTT app. Done. It was great. And by the way, it didn't cost me anything. So hurrah for OTT apps. So today we would say that for businesses, again, the ones that have the most promise are WhatsApp and Messenger. Um, but it's very interesting to see that, you can imagine the investment that it would take for any of us that are on this call to make our own app and then expect people to use it to message us. Would we be able to avoid the carriers that way? Absolutely. But again, we'd have to have a one-to-one relationship with the folks who install the application to be able to send and receive messages with those folks. But if you're tapping into something like WhatsApp, which is huge in every other country, I'm just old enough to not really know how popular it is with kids these days. That would be anybody 25 and under. I think it is pretty popular. And Messenger, I'm more familiar with that just because I think people 40 and above are very familiar with Facebook and use that most often. Welcome to Apple iMessage. So, Apple, of course, built their own ecosystem like they do everything in their walled garden. They did their own thing. And iMessage is interesting because, as we all know, there are a lot of kids out there that want to avoid those those green and blue text bubbles on their phone, right? So green being Apple iMessage, and blue being Android. Or did I get those reversed? I apologize. I'm suddenly blanking on that. But in any case, iMessage, again, is really meant to be able to be a totally private between Apple devices, between people communication service. That's why we say here, designed to be private. There's no campaigns allowed through it. But again, it really opens up some interesting things. Text, images, GIFs, videos. You can share files with somebody. You can actually, send apps back and forth through iMessage, read receipts. You can see when somebody's typing, and there's no size limits. And by the way, um, that's also going to be something you're going to see a lot of these same features available in our next three-letter acronym, which is RCS. So again, this is fully encrypted. You need internet, Wi-Fi, or cellular to make it do it, and it's only available through Apple devices. But again, Apple built their own messaging service, and it's iMessage. So RCS, you better watch out, SMS. RCS is coming. So RCS I'd love it. Rich Communication Services. That's what it stands for. These three letter acronyms are going to be the death of us, but that's really as simple as it is. So it's been around now for over a decade, guys. Believe it or not, it's been around. It's had a very up, down, sideways implementation across multiple companies and carriers. But now it's on everybody's radar, and Commio, along with a lot of our competitors, we're looking for a 2025 availability of RCS. Um, and there's still a lot to be worked out, and we're not here to tell you that we have all the answers because we don't. So part of it is we don't know the cost implications. We do know the technological implications. We know what it can do today. We know what Apple supports and doesn't support. Uh, but as we get through Q4 and into early 2025, you're going to see everybody in the space announcing that they're going to be rolling out support for RCS, or some of them already have limited RCS availability. But um, really, what it comes down to is that this will become sort of the standard messaging capability between Android and Google and on Android and Google phones. And again, it's now on Apple phones. And it's very similar to Apple iMessage and the OTT apps that I've already shown you. And I've got some great examples coming up, by the way, to show you what it's capable of. And I think what's really important about it is that pretty soon we'll be able to move from, hey, you just got your airline ticket. This is a text message, right? An SMS. Click here to get your boarding pass. And you have to click a link that then usually goes to a website, which is now, the web is now 37 years old. It's getting pretty long in the tooth. But with RCS, all that sort of the interstitial technology can go away. It'll literally be, you won't even be a link, get a boarding pass. It'll be, here's the boarding pass, complete with a barcode and the other information and interactive elements that look like an application, but it literally will be a message that comes over to your phone. So again, fully encrypted, you need the internet, Wi-Fi or cellular to make RCS work. And again, as of today, it's working on Android and it's also working on Apple. So let's continue here. So what we love about RCS as well is that anybody who uses RCS, the senders are verified by Google today. That's currently the way that it works. So it's very similar to TCR, and a lot of those KYC requirements are in place to be able to use RCS messaging today, and they can also be branded. So just like branded calling, which is something even different than this, um, we find that branded verified messages from verified senders, there's about a 29 to 30-ish% increase in open and read rates on those messages and those phone calls if they're branded. And it's all about increasing interaction and customer interactions. And the result, of course, is, better sales, better customer interactions, happier customers. They spend more money with you. So branded calling is another service that Commio has been working on for quite a while. And it's just funny to say, it's another thing we've been waiting on Apple on, because what happens when you get a call on your iPhone today and your phone is locked? Well, unfortunately, today with branded calling, the logo of the company that may be using branded calling cannot be displayed on a locked iPhone. It's not going to be that way for long, but we're seeing once that gets fixed, that's kind of one of the last roadblocks that's in place for people considering using branded calling. Although we do find that the current price point is roughly about 4 times larger just to initiate a call than it is with the current pricing that we have in the marketplace. So we see that people who really, who are using, like, say, if you have a company where it's, say somebody who's doing like home services, like they're a plumber and they're trying to get you on the phone, right, to verify, you know, uh, an appointment or whatever, a service appointment. They want to make sure that if they try to call or text you, that the logo and all that information is front and center so that you can trust that. Because I don't know about you guys, but today I let every single call go to voicemail. I let Apple transcribe it, and then I decide whether I'm going to reply or not. Well, ideally, in the very near future, with branded calling, it'll be able to say, "Oh, Tim's Plumbing is calling. Of course, I'm going to pick that up. My toilet's backed up or whatever it is. My basement is flooded. There's just a hurricane that came through. I want to answer that call." So the great news is, as we get into Q4 and into early next year, Commio is working on making branded calling available with those logos, and we're also working on RCS. So we're pretty excited about those two things. So look at this, guys. I just use this example. So instead of just getting a text that says, click here to get your boarding pass, and it's basically an image or a PDF or whatever it is of a barcode with your basic flight information, you'll save that to your Apple Wallet or your Google Wallet, whatever it is. No. Instead, this is how it'll look. You'll see that I love, look in the upper right, verified sender. There'll be a nice shield with a checkbox on it that will say, oh, this was verified. So this came from your airline. Here's all the information in it. It's branded. We can have images, videos, GIFs, any color you want. There's a QR code that will be automatically created. We can actually see client-based DLRs. We can see read receipts. The brands can actually see, oh, Tim got his boarding pass. He opened it and he scanned it. All that information will be native to the RCS implemented messages. I don't even want to call them messages anymore. They're really communications, right? These are not just simple messages anymore. And what's great too, look at the bottom. You can actually embed, it's almost like an interactive chatbot built in to your RCS communications. Like, oh, we can suggest that these are probably the top two or three things that people who get this are going to want to do next. They're suggested actions, and you can embed maps, calendars, or even a dialer to initiate a phone call. So talk about a rich, engaging, interactive experience. This is what RCS enables. So it basically turns what used to be a very simple text message into almost an interactive website without you even having to remember what a website is, because it'll just make your phone work like it's supposed to, your iPhone or your Android. All this will be built into these RCS communications. So I love the headline. Who needs an app anyway? When you have RCS, you don't need to develop an app. You just will use this to enable the communication, which will become rich and interactive without needing an app because it's all built to the RCS standards. So, but what's the deal with campaigns? Okay, great question. We still don't have a lot of answers to these questions, but they're going to be answered. And RCS was definitely designed for business. You saw that example of the airline. There are no carrier fees yet. We don't know exactly what the carrier interactions will need to be or not be, and what the fee structure will be. We really don't have any idea. So we're going to be figuring that out in short order. Remember that now that iOS 18 is out, it's now on Apple devices. RCS today is enabled. Again, it's not fully enabled. They still have some work to do. And the great thing is they're basically what the street is telling us that they expect about half of users will adopt it within the next 3 months. So we're going to start 2025 where people who have an up-to-date phone will have RCS enabled on it. So give it a year, we're going to get awful close to 100%. And with Apple, that we're really thinking that it will be almost as ubiquitous as SMS, MMS. And again, we are working very diligently on putting all the right things in place for supporting RCS, but also making it a channel that will enable things like campaigns. But we still have to answer all the relevant questions before we can roll it out. Um, Scott, great question. That this example that I showed of this airline ticket with all this interactivity, um, those are those are actually things that we know can be created by customers today and enabled through RCS. And you're asking the right question. So who's going to code this? Right? Do I have to hire a developer to make RCS stuff? The answer is we don't know. We honestly don't know yet exactly where that lives. We know nowadays that folks like the airlines have their own dedicated coding teams that are enabling things like this. So I'd like to think that it's going to shake out something like a Twilio developer, their level of expertise. Twilio and other providers will probably have some great templates that you'll be able to build off of. But the question remains, Um, yes, the functionality exists, but who's going to code it? Who's going to develop it? So, and John, a great question too. It's hard to guess on these things. I would find it hard to believe that RCS was more expensive than what we're paying for SMS, MMS today. I'd find that very hard to believe. Maybe it will be at launch. I don't know. It all depends on, where are these messages being, hosted, sent from, stored, recorded, these DLRs, like those are all costs that somebody like Commio is going to have to be able to absorb in some way. Is it going to be as expensive or less or more expensive than SMS, MMS today? It may start that way, but there's no reason to believe that it would be any more expensive than this. And this is the marketing guy speaking based on all of my reading. We don't really have the answer to that question yet, but I'm glad you're asking because obviously it makes a lot of sense. Um, I'm pretty excited about it. I know everybody else is, but we'll have more answers on that as we start going through the implementation process. So with that, let me see if you guys have any other questions here. We've had some good comments come through here. We talked about the DNC scrubbing. I think that is a big question. And by the way, it really, as long as you're doing all the right things from a know your customer opt-in perspective and you're recording the opt-ins, all those kinds of things. And then when and if a traceback occurs and somebody accuses somebody like you of sending them a call or a text message, but they're on a DNC list, you just need to be ready to answer those questions with the right information and the right data about who opted in, when, where, and how. So that's really where that comes down to. Um, and let's see. Yeah, I think let's see. Yeah, we talked about the fees. We talked about less expensive or more expensive. We talked about the airline example. And yeah, John, agreed. Content creation and storage will be a challenge. Yeah, well, let's go with opportunity, right? Let's go with opportunity. You're not wrong. It's going to cost money and somebody's going to have to pay it, and it just depends. So, but that's great. So, by the way, I want to say a super thank you for joining us. This is really what we wanted these Telecom Wise Guys presentations to be about this length, about a topic like this, giving you a look ahead. So I love that we can go to market with things like this. We don't have all the answers, but I hope you guys are just as excited as we are. I think you would all agree that it's been a supreme challenge this last year in particular to do SMS, MMS across this ecosphere. And staying ahead of it is costing all of us time and money and energy that we'd rather be spending making our creative better, improving throughput, increasing, making our relationships with our customers and our prospects better. But it is what it is. And I don't even like saying those words out loud, but it kind of is. But we're hoping that with RCS in particular, especially with, once we get past all this know your customer information, that we can open up better throughput as well as higher quality interactions for our customers with RCS. And we know that SMS and MMS are supreme today, but we also are under no illusion that RCS won't pretty rapidly take away a lot of that traffic and also make those interactive moments from trusted senders that people want to get more lucrative and more interactive and a better fit for businesses. So we just need to answer those interim questions. And we're super excited about implementing it and getting it rolled out to you guys as we go through Q4 and into early next year, as well as branded calling. Which we find, has been an interesting integration process. It's taken us longer than we anticipated, but I think you guys are going to find that what you're going to be able to visually show to somebody who's asked to get a call from you as a trusted sender will also increase your open rates, and not only for you, but also for your customers. So more details to come on branded calling and RCS. But with that, I'm going to sign off from kind of a dreary, rainy day here in Raleigh, North Carolina, as we work through the remnants of this storm. And we hope all of you have had a wonderful September so far. Fall is close at hand. And again, if you have any questions, comments, whatever, when you get this recording, reply to that email. I will get those and get you the answers that you need. And otherwise, we invite you to come back for our next Telecom Wise Guy series and bring your questions, your enthusiasm, and we're here. We're going to be here for you. at Commio. So with that, have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you real soon. Thank you very much.